We begin this morning with President Trump escalating his war on blue cities amid the growing government shutdown. Last night, he authorized the deployment of 300 National Guard members in Chicago against the wishes of Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. The move comes amid clashes between immigration officials and protesters over ICE raids in and around the city. But while President Trump pushes the limits of his presidential authority in Chicago, a federal judge in Oregon temporarily blocked his call of 200 National Guard troops to Portland. The Trump administration has already appealed this decision. All of this as the government shutdown enters its fifth day today, with no clear signs of a quick resolution. The Wall Street Journal reports that while the president projects confidence that he's winning the standoff, behind the scenes, his team is increasingly concerned that the issue at the center of the debate will create political vulnerabilities for Republicans. It continues, advisors are worried that the GOP will take the blame for allowing health care subsidies to expire, raising costs for millions of Americans ahead of next year's midterm elections, according to administration officials. Trump and congressional Republicans are already bearing the brunt of the blame, according to early polling. The Washington Post poll this week found that 47% believe that Trump and Republicans in Congress are responsible for the shutdown, while 30% believe that Democrats are to blame. 23% weren't sure. Democrats oppose anything that strips access to affordable health care. And House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries told our colleague Ali Velshi that Democrats will continue to fight.
Republicans thought that we would back down as a result of their deepfake videos, threats, project cancellations, and lies. But Democrats aren't going to bend. Democrats are not going to break, because we're standing up for the health care of working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans.
Joining us now, Sam Stein, managing editor of The Bulwark and an MSNBC contributor, and Politico Magazine senior writer and former federal prosecutor, Ankush Khardori. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. So we know 300 National Guard troops have been deployed to Illinois, but meanwhile in Portland, a district judge has blocked the National Guard deployment. I want to pull up the statement and the ruling from the judge yesterday. This country has a long-standing and foundational tradition of resistance to government overreach, especially in the form of military intrusion into civil affairs, the U.S. district judge wrote. This historical tradition boils down to a simple proposition. This is a nation of constitutional law, not martial law. Defendants have made a range of arguments that, if accepted, risk blurring the line between civil and military federal power to the detriment of this nation.
It's almost like she's a real conservative.
That, which was going to be my next point. This was a Trump-appointed judge, Ankush. What do you make of this ruling? And is the Trump administration going to send National Guard to Portland anyways?
I don't think they'll do it anyways. We'll see, because they've generally respected these initial preliminary rulings and gone through the appeals process on this issue. What I make of it, I mean, this is not the first time a judge has reached this conclusion at this stage. We saw this in L.A., actually. There was a very, very early challenge filed in front of Judge Breyer. He issued a somewhat similar ruling as this judge did, saying there's no rebellion here, there's no threat of a rebellion, and the government is able to execute its federal laws adequately, which are the sort of the core legal standards that are relevant here. He eventually got reversed by the Ninth Circuit, which said he had not given the administration sufficient deference on their sort of assessment of the situation. So we've kind of seen this play out before. I do think this decision is on sturdier ground. You can see that the judge made an effort to really sort of put on some sort of belts and suspenders that Breyer may not have been able to at that point in the procedure. But, you know, it'll go up on appeal. There's a couple weeks that it's in place pending that appeal. And I would expect, or at least hope, that the Trump administration will obey the ruling in the meantime.
Ankush, if I remember the reporting right, the administration is going to appeal to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit has a reputation of being the liberal circuit court. Should the administration expect a ruling to go against them, or is there a possibility that the Ninth Circuit, again, known as being a liberal circuit, actually side with the president in this?
There is a possibility. I mean, to some people's surprise, including my own, the Ninth Circuit reversed Judge Breyer on that first early ruling, basically saying he hadn't had a sufficient factual record at that time. Now, you can see this judge made an effort to fix that issue by soliciting a lot of declarations and evidence at this point to the extent that she could. So it is very possible, actually, the Ninth Circuit could end up reversing a decision like this. The theory that the circuit used at that time, the three-judge panel, was effectively that the president is entitled to an extraordinary amount of deference on these sorts of questions about military standing and the execution of federal laws. I question now whether a panel looking at the same issue now, given the months that have passed and the ways in which the administration has behaved in the meantime, would extend that same level of deference to the administration at this point in time, and we'll see.
We have the Attorney General of Oregon coming on later on, just in a little bit, so y'all pay attention to that. But I want to move to Chicago for just a little bit, Sam, because we found out about these 300 National Guardsmen from the governor's social post on X, right?
Yeah.
Saying that the president of the United States had sent him a letter saying that he was nationalizing the National Guard. When you look at kind of the loggerheads that ends up happening when these governors say we don't need this, and more importantly, they say that it's a show. It is a show of force. It's trying to get the American people used to folks in military garb on the street. And it's not actually about crime or immigration. We're 9 months into this. This has happened over and over again. Which message do you think is winning out with the American people?
Well, it's tough to tell. I mean, I think from a polling perspective, I guess, Trump still does fairly decently on issues of crime relative to the other issues, right? So you can make the case that this is ground that he wants to be on. At the same time, I think there has been a real revulsion to some of the tactics and the rhetoric that they've used. You can see people recoil at the idea of military in the streets. You can see, frankly, there's been internal communications that have leaked out into the public where they themselves are a little bit uneasy about it. There's this kind of fascinating piece yesterday in the Star Tribune, Minneapolis Star Tribune, where a reporter got access to a bunch of text messages, just took photos, a source took photos of them. And in these text messages, there's a back and forth between senior officials where they're like, you know, we need cover if we're going to send in the 82nd Airborne to Portland. This is, you know, a little iffy. And it gave you a real window into this internal tension. So clearly they see it as divisive, which it is. But ultimately, you get the sense that the administration does want to have this fight. I mean, it doesn't really take much to get that sense, because you can watch the Twitter feed of Stephen Miller, for instance, and he's talking about, you know, there's a terrorist attack on this country and we have to go after it. And, you know, then you have Kristi Noem doing live streams of her touring Chicago. It's almost as if this is a public broadcast of their actions for the public to consume. So I think they enjoy this issue, even though it's quite terrifying for a lot of people.
You know, this is what's so I was going to say sick, but I think that's maybe a bit extreme. What's disturbing about this, it's one thing to say we're going in there to do something about crime.
Right.
It's another to do something that's akin to an invasion, which is what we saw in Chicago, which we talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
Black Hawk helicopters with federal law enforcement rappelling out of helicopters, raiding an apartment building, pulling people out, some of them naked in the streets. Is that about crime, or is that about sending an intimidating and threatening message, not just to the people of Chicago, but to the country?
Well, I think it's about sending a message. A lot of this, let's just look at the D.C. portion, because we have that as an example. When they brought in all their the forces, a lot of them weren't doing anything with respect to crime, but what they were doing was immigration enforcement.
Yeah.
And a lot of the immigration enforcement actions that this administration takes is essentially to send a message. They want to have more or less a policy of self-deportation. They want people to feel so uncomfortable, so under attack, that they actually self-deport. And so this is a sort of policy perspective. On the flip side of this, or not the flip side, in relation to this, the rhetoric they've adopted and the actions they've taken are incredibly divisive. I mean, they're treating the country as if it's in a civil war. When the president says a war within, when the top advisor says there's terrorist organizations within the country, and when they send Black Hawk helicopters, it is as if they are picking a fight with a portion of the country.
Well, and even the language that Stephen Miller used to respond to the Oregon judge's ruling, he called it a legal insurrection.
Yeah.
And you are seeing everything being framed in the term, in terms of
the most hyperbolic war terms. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, he's incapable of using anything over-the-top hyperbolic language.
Is it a problem legally for them if when these states sue the federal government, you just look at Stephen Miller's tweets and he's hyperbolic and he's saying stuff that's not true? Is that helpful in court for these states that are trying to protect the...
It is not. And in fact, they've run into a little bit of trouble recently just on this question because of Trump's posts have been coming into these legal proceedings, and the government's been sort of trying to, like, at times run away from them, at times embrace them and say that these are actually our orders, and the judge is saying, what are you talking about? These are true social posts. So it is not helpful to them on balance, setting aside the politics. I mean, the legalities of it, particularly if they're sort of uncontrolled statements like the ones that Miller makes, and particularly Trump, right, because it's the president. Anything he says is going to get sort of extraordinary amount of attention by the courts.
Sam?
Yes?
How long is this shutdown going to last? Quick, that's called a hard pivot.
Yeah, what was the relation here? No. You tell me. I don't know. What is I guess the shutdowns end when some side realizes it's not in their interest to do this.
But does it? Because you
Yes.
I mean, look at the polling. The polling is already in favor of...
I was going to say, so for a while I was basically convinced that eventually Democrats would realize it's not in their interest. But the polling is pretty striking, honestly, and a little bit surprising. I wonder if it changes, but it's very clear at this point that the public is blaming the Republicans for this. Maybe they just assume that Republicans don't like government, so they shut it down. Also, if you talk to Democrats, they feel a little bit more bullish about it now. Not because necessarily they think they're winning, although they think it's better than they thought, but because they do believe that they're setting up this situation where when these premiums go up because of the subsidies getting lapsed, they're putting more attention on this issue than has ever been put on the issue. And when it does happen, it's very clear now who's to blame. And so they've, whether they stumbled into it or they did this strategically, they've ended up in a place where they feel like they framed the argument effectively around the subsidies.
Seeds have been planted.
Yeah.